Okay, so I had to sit with this for a second because somebody is really trying to convince themselves that not reaching out is somehow giving them control. And I'm looking at the magician here, right? Symbolically, this is all about intention, communication, what you choose to do with what you already have in front of you. So why is somebody sitting there with everything they need to say something and still saying nothing? That's what's irritating me. Because I feel like this person did something, contributed to the distance, maybe disappeared, maybe got defensive, maybe started acting weird. And then when you stopped giving them the same access, suddenly they got an attitude, like, "Are you offended because I responded to your behaviour?" What? And I keep getting this back and forth thing where they thought, fine, if you're not going to reach out, I'm not reaching out either. Okay, cute. Except I don't think they expected you to actually stick to it. That's where the magician gets interesting to me, because this person feels very aware of communication right now. Not necessarily doing it yet. Hold on, I'm not giving them that much credit, but thinking about it. Oh, absolutely. It feels like they've mentally written this message 5 different ways. Do I say hello? Do I apologize? Do I act normal? Do I send something funny? Do I pretend I just happened to think about you? No, because you didn't just happen to think about them. You've been thinking about this, and there's something else here. This person used to believe they had more time. That's the part I want to clarify, because why does this suddenly feel urgent? What happened between I can stay quiet and, wait, what if they actually move on? Because the magician is somebody wanting to make something happen. Somebody wanting to influence the situation again. And psychologically, that tells me their biggest problem right now may not simply be missing you. It may be realizing they no longer know whether they can still reach you the way they used to. And oh, yeah, that changes the whole energy. Because if they believed you were still emotionally waiting, there would be no urgency. So what made them realize you might not be waiting anymore? I think it was the lack of reaction. And I'm looking at this Queen of Pentacles here, and that actually makes a lot of sense psychologically, because this is somebody whose energy is grounded, settled, focused on what's actually in front of them, not sitting around refreshing a phone every 5 minutes. And I think that bothered this person more than they expected, because before, even if you weren't talking, maybe there was still some kind of emotional reassurance they could pick up on. Maybe you checked in eventually. Maybe you reacted to something. Maybe you left some little door cracked open that told them, okay, they're upset, but they're still here. Now, they don't know, and that's the problem. Something about you feels less available to them. Not necessarily angry, not necessarily cold, just occupied, like your attention went somewhere else. And wait, because that's actually worse for somebody who was using silence to prove a point. You wanted them sitting there, thinking about why you weren't talking to them. Meanwhile, they started thinking about their own life. So, now, what? You thought silence was going to make them chase you, and now you're confused because they found something else to do? Okay. And I don't even think there had to be another person involved. I want to be careful with that, because everybody immediately hears moving on and thinks, oh, somebody new. Not necessarily. Sometimes moving on is literally just somebody getting their energy back. They're sleeping better. They're not checking. They're not rehearsing the conversation anymore. They're making plans without wondering whether you're going to suddenly appear. That is a change. And this Queen of Pentacles energy feels like somebody becoming much more protective of their peace because they finally realised how expensive this situation was emotionally. That's what I think this person noticed. The reassurance disappeared. You stopped participating in this invisible argument, because you can't have a standoff with somebody who walked away from the table. Hello? And now they're sitting there going, wait, are they seriously not going to do anything? No, because eventually somebody gets tired. And I think that's where the urgency is coming from. They're realising that every day they stay quiet, you're not necessarily missing them harder. You might actually be adjusting to their absence. Oh, that'll do it. Because now this isn't just, what if I lose contact with them? I think the question getting under their skin is much worse. What if I already lost my place in their life? And that's where this Eight of Wands is getting my attention, because now the energy feels different, faster. Not necessarily because something has already happened, but because mentally. This person is starting to realise time is moving whether they participate or not, and I don't think they like that realisation, because missing you is one thing. Missing you can still be comfortable. You can miss somebody from a distance and tell yourself, well, they probably miss me too. Okay, that keeps the ego intact. But realising somebody may be building a life that does not emotionally revolve around whether you call them, oh, that's different, because now they have to imagine you laughing without them, sleeping fine, going out, making plans, having conversations they know nothing about, maybe meeting new people, maybe not. That's honestly not even the point. The point is you're living, and they're not controlling the pace of that anymore. That's why the Eight of Wands makes sense psychologically here. Things keep moving, life keeps moving, your attention keeps moving. And suddenly they're realising, wait, I thought we were both sitting in the same emotional waiting room. No, you put yourself in there, that was your choice. And this is what's almost funny to me, because I feel like this person wanted proof that they mattered to you. So what did they do? They withheld themselves, they waited, they stayed quiet, they thought, if I matter, they'll come looking for me. Instead, that silence may have taught you how to function without them. Do you understand how backwards that is? You were trying to prove your importance by removing your presence, and then got scared when somebody adjusted to your absence. Like, come on. And I think that's where the urgency starts. Because now this isn't just, I miss them. It's, what if they don't emotionally organise their day around me anymore? What if you don't check your phone hoping it's them? What if their name doesn't have the same power over your mood? What if you stopped wondering what they're doing every 5 minutes? That is what scares them. Because pride was easy when they thought everything was frozen. They could take their time, they could come back whenever. But the Eight of Wands says, the situation isn't frozen, something is moving, and I think now they're looking backward. At that conversation, that moment. That one opportunity where they could have said, okay, this is stupid, let's talk, and fix this before it became complicated. But they didn't, they chose pride, and now, I think they're replaying the exact moment when fixing this would have been easy. And with this Two of Pentacles here, I feel like that replay is happening, because they can see how much unnecessary juggling they created. Because look at this, they had options, they had moments, they had opportunities to make this simple. And instead, they kept going back and forth. Should I say something? No, let them come to me. Maybe I should apologise. No, because then I look weak. I miss them. Okay, but I'm still not texting first. Like, do you hear yourself? Because the Two of Pentacles, psychologically, can be that constant managing. Trying to keep everything balanced without actually making a decision. And I think that's exactly what this person did. They tried to manage their feelings instead of addressing them. They tried to manage the distance, manage how much they showed, manage who cared more, manage who reached out first. And meanwhile, the actual connection was sitting there like, are we going to deal with the problem or not? Apparently not. Because now I feel like they're thinking about all these really small moments where this could have gone differently. Maybe there was a message they saw and waited too long to answer. Maybe you gave them an opening and they responded defensively. Maybe there was a conversation where they knew they should have softened, but instead they doubled down. Or maybe they literally thought, I'll handle it later. That later is doing a lot of damage now, because regret is weird like that. Sometimes it's not, I made this enormous, unforgivable mistake. Sometimes it's just, I could have said something. I could have handled that better. Why did I make that so difficult? And that's what I'm getting here. Their pride probably felt protective at the time. Like if they didn't admit they cared, then you couldn't hurt them. If they didn't reach first, then technically they weren't the vulnerable one. Okay. But what did that protection cost you? Because now you're missing somebody you could have been talking to this entire time. That doesn't look very protective anymore. It looks expensive. And I think there's another layer to this Two of Pentacles. They may have believed you couldn't tell what they were doing. Like you didn't recognize the hesitation, the hot and cold behavior, the little power struggle, the I care, but I'm going to act like I don't care because I need you to prove that you care first thing. Oh, you saw it. Maybe you didn't call it out every time. Maybe you didn't argue. Maybe eventually you just got tired. And that might actually be worse for them. Because now they're not only regretting what they did, they're realizing you understood it while it was happening. And I think that's the part embarrassing them now. You understood exactly what they were doing, and you stopped playing along. And I think that's why this Ace of Pentacles is showing up now, because the whole dynamic starts changing once you stop investing in something that keeps giving you confusion back. That's really what this feels like. You didn't necessarily become cold. You didn't necessarily stop caring overnight. You just stopped rewarding inconsistency. Big difference. Because if somebody pulls away and you chase, they learn that pulling away gets your attention. If somebody becomes defensive and you immediately start explaining yourself, they learn defensiveness gets reassurance. If somebody goes quiet and you panic, well, now silence has a reward attached to it. And I don't even think this person necessarily sat there plotting all of that. Some of this feels more immature than malicious. Maybe they were scared of rejection. Maybe they wanted reassurance without having to ask for it. Maybe they needed proof you cared before they were willing to risk showing that they cared. Fine, but insecurity can still create really unhealthy behavior, and eventually you were like, no, I'm not doing this every time. That's where the Ace of Pentacles gets interesting to me, because psychologically this is something tangible, something real. What are you actually putting into the situation? Not hints, not pride, not well, they should know. What are you actually offering? Because I think this person expected your attachment to keep the connection alive while they decided how vulnerable they felt like being, and then you stopped carrying both sides. Oops. Now, they have to feel the weight of their own silence, and I think that's what destabilized them. They wanted evidence that you love them enough to chase. Instead, they got evidence that you respect yourself enough to stop. Those are very different things. And now every day they stay quiet creates another problem. Because yesterday they could have reached out and said, hey, I've been thinking. Today, now there's another day to explain. Another day where you had no reason to believe they were coming back. Another day where you got more comfortable without them. And tomorrow? Same problem, except worse. That's the part they didn't think through. Pride feels powerful when you believe you can end it whenever you want. But once enough time passes, suddenly you're sitting there thinking, okay, how do I even come back from this without looking ridiculous? Exactly. Because now reaching out isn't just about sending a message. It's admitting the silence lasted longer than it needed to. And every extra day makes that admission heavier. So somehow, without meaning to, this person's pride created its own deadline. Because tomorrow's message comes with one more day of silence they have to explain. And that's why this Ten of Wands is making so much sense here. Because now the silence itself has become something they're carrying. It was supposed to make things easier. That's the ridiculous part. They stayed quiet because reaching out felt uncomfortable. And now? Not reaching out is uncomfortable too. So congratulations, I guess. You avoided one awkward conversation and somehow created 12 more. Because now every possible message feels loaded. If they come in too casually, hey, what's up? Okay, what's up? You disappeared for however long and now we're pretending this is Tuesday afternoon at the grocery store. Be serious. But if they come in too emotionally, I've been thinking about everything and I really need to apologize. Well, now they have to admit this mattered enough to sit with them. And I think that's the part their pride keeps fighting. Because there is no perfectly safe message anymore. That option expired. The longer they waited, the more the silence became part of what has to be addressed. And this Ten of Wands, psychologically, is that accumulated pressure. One thing on top of another, the original issue, then the defensiveness, then the silence, then the waiting, then wondering why you haven't reached out, then realizing you might actually be fine, like, you could just send the text. Now look at all this, and I can almost feel this person trying to find some exact combination of words where they can reconnect with you without exposing how nervous they are. Type something. Delete it. Type something else. No, that sounds desperate. Delete. Maybe I'll make a joke. No, because what if you don't laugh? Okay, delete that too. And meanwhile, the clock is still moving. That's the trap, because waiting doesn't make the message easier anymore. It makes it heavier. But I think there's something even more uncomfortable underneath the fear that you won't answer. What if you do? That sounds backwards, but stay with me. What if they finally send it? And you respond. You're polite. You're nice, maybe even friendly, but there's no urgency in you. No emotional rush, no oh my god, finally. Just, hey, hope you're doing well. Oh, because rejection hurts, obviously. But emotional distance? That tells them something has actually changed. So now I'm wondering what scares this person more. You never responding at all. Or discovering they can still reach you, but they can't reach you the same way anymore. Because that second one, that's harder. And with the Empress reversed here, I think that's exactly what they're worried about. Not that you hate them. Not that you're furious. Honestly, I think anger might almost make them feel better. Because anger still says, you affect me. Anger still says there's emotional heat there. But calm? Calm is terrifying when somebody was depending on your emotional reaction to reassure themselves that they still mattered. That's what the Empress reversed is showing me psychologically. The warmth is not automatically available anymore, the nurturing, the emotional access. That sense of, no matter what happens, this person is still going to care for the connection. Maybe you do care, that doesn't mean you're responding the same way. And I think they know that now. Because imagine they finally reach out expecting this huge reaction. Maybe they expect questions, maybe they expect you to be angry, maybe they expect, where have you been? Something. Anything that proves they can still walk into the room emotionally and rearrange all the furniture. And instead you're like, hey, good to hear from you. Oh, wait. That's it? And here's the contradiction that's getting me. You didn't want drama, but now you're terrified they're not dramatic about you anymore? Excuse me? Because when somebody is used to being able to trigger a certain emotional response, even conflict can feel reassuring. At least if you're arguing, they know you're invested. At least if you're upset, they know the connection still has weight. But if you're calm, if their name pops up, and your whole day doesn't suddenly change, now they have to consider that your emotional relationship to them may have shifted. And I think that possibility is doing more to break down their pride than anything else. Because at some point, protecting your ego stops feeling protective. It just starts feeling lonely. They can keep saying, I'm not reaching out first. Okay, and then what? You lose the person? You lose the connection? You lose the opportunity to even find out whether this can be repaired? For what? So nobody can accuse you of caring. Come on. I think they're getting very close to the point where risking rejection feels less painful than continuing to wonder. And that matters. Because if they do reach out, I don't necessarily think it's going to look huge. It may actually look almost ridiculously normal. A simple message. A small opening, something you could easily underestimate, but I wouldn't confuse an ordinary-looking message with an ordinary amount of courage behind it. Because for somebody this stubborn, pressing send may be the part they've been fighting themselves over this entire time. And with the moon here, I think that's exactly why the first message may be so indirect, because they're still nervous, they're still trying to figure out what's safe. So instead of saying, I miss you and I've been thinking about everything, it might be something like, hey, did you ever watch that show? Or, this randomly reminded me of you. Or maybe they ask you a question they absolutely could have figured out without your help. You know what I mean? Like, suddenly Google stopped working? Okay, because the moon psychologically is uncertainty. It's not knowing exactly what you're walking into, and this person does not know what version of you they're going to get anymore. That's important. They remember the version of you who cared. They remember the version who probably would have been relieved to hear from them. But they don't know if that person is still standing there. So they may test the water first. A joke, a memory, a casual, how have you been? Something that gives them room to pretend it wasn't that serious if you don't respond the way they hoped. And listen, I'm not saying you should see one little hey and immediately turn it into some huge emotional declaration. No, we're not doing that either. Reaching out is reaching out. Repairing something is different. Big difference. Because yes, breaking their own silence matters, especially if pride was the thing keeping them quiet. But sending a message does not automatically fix what created the distance. They still have to show up after that. They still have to communicate. They still have to be honest. And I think that's where the moon gets really interesting. Because the first message may actually be the easiest part. Once you answer, now the fog starts clearing. Now they have to see what's actually there. And if you don't immediately make it comfortable for them, if you're kind, but you don't rush in and erase the awkwardness, oh, now they have to do something. Because they can't just toss out a little opening and expect you to carry the entire conversation from there. They wanted contact. Okay. Here it is. Now what? Are you going to hide behind jokes? Are you going to pretend nothing happened? Are you going to wait for them to make you feel safe before you say anything real? Because I think that's the actual test. Not whether they can press send. Whether, once that door opens, they can finally say the thing they refused to say when silence still felt safer. And that's where the fool is interesting to me. Because at some point they have to stop trying to control how this goes. That's the whole problem. They've been trying to manage the outcome before they even take the risk. How do I reach out without looking stupid? How do I apologize without giving up too much power? How do I know they still want me before I admit that I still want them? You don't. That's it. You don't get that guarantee. And I think this person is finally realizing that. Because the fool, psychologically, is that moment where you have to move without knowing exactly what happens next. Not recklessly. Not pretending nothing happened, but accepting that vulnerability comes with uncertainty. And for somebody who has spent this much time protecting their pride, that probably feels awful. Because the real thing they've been avoiding isn't the message. It's what the message admits. That they cared more than they acted like they cared. That your absence affected them more than they wanted it to. That somewhere along the way, they assumed you would remain emotionally available while they figured themselves out. And now they're realizing, oh, maybe that wasn't fair. Maybe I thought I could keep this connection on pause without asking whether the other person agreed to wait. Exactly. And I think that's where this gets more serious. Because I miss you is easy compared to the actual admission underneath it. The harder truth is something like, I kept acting like this didn't matter, because admitting that it mattered made me feel exposed. That's different. That requires them to look at their own behaviour. Because what did winning this little standoff actually get them? Nobody reached out. Congratulations. Did you feel better? Did the pride keep you company? Did being technically right make losing access to somebody you care about feel good? No? Okay then. And I think the fool represents that point where they may finally decide the risk of looking vulnerable is smaller than the risk of losing this completely. But listen, this is also where your side of the equation matters. Because them becoming brave enough to reach out does not automatically mean you become responsible for making everything okay. You can hear them, you can care, you can even be open. But now, you get to watch what happens next. Do they take accountability? Do they stay consistent? Do they communicate when things get uncomfortable instead of disappearing again? Because the real surrender of pride isn't one emotional message. It's changed behaviour. So, yes, maybe this person finally takes that leap. Maybe they finally admit this mattered. Maybe they finally stop pretending they can lose you and be unaffected. But because, okay, you called, you texted, you broke the silence. Now what are you actually willing to do differently? And with this Four of Pentacles here, I think that question becomes really important. Because this card is literally making me think about holding on, holding back, holding everything so tightly, because you're afraid that if you loosen your grip, you lose control. And that has been this person's problem the entire time. They cared, so they held it in. They were afraid of rejection, so they withheld. They wanted reassurance, so they waited for you to provide it first. And eventually, Holding back started costing them more than being honest would have. That's the shift. Because I don't think this person suddenly stopped having pride. No. I think they finally realised pride is not actually protecting the thing they want. It's threatening it. And there's a difference, because you can sit there holding on to your ego like, well, I'm not going to be the one who reaches out. Okay, keep holding it, but what else are you losing while you're doing that? That's what I think finally got through to them, and this takes me all the way back to the magician. Intention. Communication. Having everything available to you and deciding what you're actually going to do with it. Because thinking about contacting you is not the same as contacting you. Missing you is not accountability. Feeling regret is not changed behaviour. And saying, I don't want to lose you means very little if they continue doing the exact things that created the distance. That's where you get to stay grounded. You don't have to punish them. You don't have to make them suffer because you suffered. But you also don't have to hear one apology and immediately hand them the same access they used to have. No, they can knock, you can answer. And then you watch. Do their actions match the conversation? Do they show up tomorrow? And next week? When they're uncomfortable again, do they communicate or disappear? Because that's the part that matters now. And honestly, I think that's what makes this whole thing different. You're not sitting there waiting to be chosen anymore. They're realising they have to show you why letting them back into your life would actually make sense. Oh. Different situation. Because losing you is finally starting to feel more serious than admitting they care. More serious than being embarrassed. More serious than having to say, yeah, I handled that badly. And maybe that's exactly what needed to happen. Because the important part isn't that somebody finally swallowed their pride long enough to pick up the phone. It's that when that phone rings, you no longer have to lower your standards just because they finally decided to call.